So, do you know about the cartoon Gravity Falls? I found that it has some very interesting parallels to One Piece, especially considering what happens in chapter 1120 of One Piece. So, Gravity Falls was a cartoon on the Disney Channel that premiered on June 29th of 2012. It takes place within the fictional town of Gravity Falls, which is within the state of Oregon, within the United States of America. So the two main characters of the show are Dipper and Mabel Pines. However, they don't matter for the context of this video. Who matters are their two great uncles, Stan Lee and Stanford Pines. Stanford Pines is the glue of this entire show, as he is the intellectual one of the two, and he is the one who finds out all these mysteries and keeps journals of all his findings. These journals turn out to be the main crux of the entire show, because when you bring them together in one piece, see what I did there? When you bring them together, they give you instructions of how to run this portal that he keeps in the basement of his shack. His brother, Stanley Pines, is sort of the lesser intellect of the two, because he's the gruff, no-nonsense action hero twin. So what he does after Stanford goes missing is that he, like other parties in the show, are on the hunt for these notebooks, and miraculously, even though he's depicted as a lesser intellect, actually brings these notebooks together in one piece and is able to bring his brother back from this portal, which is a weird interdimensional gateway of sorts. Now, how does this relate back to One Piece other than the joke I made earlier? Well, in One Piece, specifically in chapter 1120, we are introduced to the real name of Clover, who was the teacher of one Nico Robin when she was a child. His name is Clow D. Clover. Clow in French means nail. It is also revealed that, much like Stanley and Stanford, he has a brother. His brother, we do not know the name of, but seeing as how he was killed in the events of the past, that means that he too was a D. Like Stanley and Stanford, Clow goes on a grand adventure and uncovers all this research in the world by collecting books, of which he culminates into this giant library in Ohara. See the theming? He's hunting for books. Stanford wrote books. Stanley then went off to find the books. You kind of get the theming of the whole video. Anyway, so here we know that Clow has a brother we don't know the name of, but it does give us context as to how Ohara was made up. With that being said, I think it's a very interesting name that he's been given. Seeing as how his name means nail in French, I think that could just be a spin on how he functions in the story of One Piece, because he's the one who brings things together. A nail is meant to bind one solid to another, and he did that for Dr. Vegapunk, because without his research, Dr. Vegapunk wouldn't come to the conclusions that he has come to within his giant broadcast that he's doing currently in Egghead Island. So, with that being said, that is a very interesting name. Now, I think, much like the twins Stan Lee and Stanford in Gravity Falls, that Clow's brother most likely was the one who started him on his interest and on his journey into uncovering the secrets of the world. Because even though being killed over having a D in your name is something that is likely to happen in One Piece, what really sets the world government off is when you are actively trying to undermine their authority by finding out the true history of the world, which I think is what Clover's brother was actually on. Now, what might be his name is the French word for hammer, which is marteau. I am not a French speaker. I am probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but that can also mean hammer, knocker, gavel, or crutch. So in this situation, you have nail and hammer. So while his brother being the hammer in this situation, was trying to break through the ceiling and find out the secrets. His brother, who is named Nail, was the one who actually pieces things together for others to find, if that makes sense. So that's what I think the relationship is there. So what does this mean for Nico Robin? Well, obviously, she is going to continue to carry out the will of D, I guess, seeing as how D Clover is a D, and completing Clover's research and finding out the true history of the world, which is now something that Vegapunk also tried to do, but he didn't have all the pieces. So the only way to find out everything is to read all the road poneglyphs and to get to Laugh Tale, which is where the One Piece is. And I assume that there's a poneglyph in Laugh Tale in which one has to read, which makes sense because that's most likely how Roger and the boys found out the true history, because they had someone with them as well who could read the poneglyphs, and Kazuki Oden. So with that being said, I think another relation that is possible between Nico Robin and the Clover family is that perhaps Nico Olivia, Robin's mother, is a relative to Clover or Clover's brother, whatever his name may be. Like that could be perhaps her grandfather, making Cloud D. Clover Robin's great uncle. I know that the idea of Robin being a D might sound hokey, but we have had similar things of people hiding their heritage or changing their name in the past. Clover never revealed he was a D, and that was unknown information up until now in 1120. Following that, we have instances like Law, who never revealed he was a D, and we found that out in his flashback. He's the only D actually with another middle name, which is interesting within itself. And then, of course, we have Ace, who doesn't go by Gold D Ace to eliminate any association with Roger. He goes by his mother's name, who is also a D, in being called Porgas D Ace. So there's a lot of name nonsense going on with members of the D Clan. On top of that, here's kind of a weird sticking point. She introduces us to the significance of the D initial. Way back in Alabasta, after Crocodile and Luffy have their first fight and Robin saves Luffy, she mentions the D initial significance for the first time. So she is the catalyst for all this D stuff being a thing in the narrative. So it's a little touch and go, but if she was a D, I could believe it. On top of that, this is the funnier part, she knows how to make Luffy understand information. Like when Luffy was trying to remember who Marco was, Robin chimes in and says, "Oh, he looks like a pineapple," and Luffy gets it immediately. And there are little instances like that in the story that makes me think that she could be one. But what's interesting about D-Clan members is that they seem to have this weird innate ability to understand one another, which is how we get an alliance between the Heart Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates to take down the Yonko. What's furthermore interesting about this is that Law knows how to best utilize Luffy in his plans, and Luffy delivers on every single thing that is asked of him. What's further interesting about this too is that other than Luffy, the one Straw Hat that Law spends a significant amount of time with, and that time yields some very interesting information, is Nico Robin. Because at the end of the Wano arc, it is Robin and Law together who find out the true history of Wano, that there's a under Wano that was flooded many years ago. So that in itself is very interesting. Now I think an apology is in order, because I did say during my video on chapter 1120, based on the information we had at the time, I said that Clover's name was Clover D. Cleoma, which is incorrect. Now I did look it up, and Cleoma does mean Claymore, which I thought that could roll into other things because it is a very interesting name. But moving forward, we're going to have to be a bit more careful when information is being divulged by sources that aren't the official translation. Because in this case, I don't think the official translation is wrong. But I just wanted to say that that was a mistake on my part. But continuing back to Nico Robin, based on how the whole element was introduced by her and how she interacts around Luffy, it makes you think that it's a possibility that she could in fact be a D. But we'll find that out as the story moves forward. I could see that becoming a thing in Elbaf, seeing as how Elbaf is going to be a big story arc for Robin and Usopp, presumably. And of course, we know Jaguar D. Saul is still alive. So that's another thing to look forward to. With that being said, that's all I have for you today. Give me your thoughts.